In this video, we'll figure out how big is big enough. That's what she said. Hey, it's Something Crafted here again, and today we cover a few topics, how to decide whether you need to have bigger or not. And we're talking here about brake rotors. Nowadays, bikes usually comes with 180 in front and 160 millimeters rotor at the rear, which for majority of cases is more than enough. However, there are a few exceptions which you take into account. If you're a heavier rider, if you ride a lot in longer descents, or you just want to have additional braking power. If that's the case, you have two options. One is to add bigger rotor size disc, the other is to change your brakes from 2-pot to 4-pot, aka piston brakes. In my case, I did 1.5 of those things and I will cover them later, but if you're looking about this topic, I will cover a few things to take care into account to consider whether you should do it or not. This video is going to be more about the rotor size itself. How do you decide whether you need bigger rotor? In front it's 180, at the rear in stock it's 160. Do you need bigger in front? Well, the simplest thing which I could point this out, do you cook your brakes? So basically the sides becomes significantly yellow. That means you're really pushing those brakes hard, or in the extreme cases they become like rainbow colors like. That means you are overheating your brakes and you might benefit from bigger braking surface. 180, it's more than enough for me, and even when I had two piston brakes, I've been in the Alpentour Trophy as well, where descents were really long. The front was fine. Maybe I was not braking enough with the front, who knows? But at the same time, 180, in my opinion, for XT type of riding, even if it includes majority of trails, 180 for the front is enough. Now, if we talk about the rear, that's a different story. Currently, I have 180 installed to the rear because I wanted to check how it performs on Spark, and I will share my notices, but basically the 160, it just cooks really fast. I have preference of using rear slightly more than the front, but at the same time, because the rear is originally 160 millimeters and it's smaller, that means it will heat up faster anyways. So with that in mind, if you're experiencing a loss of brakes during the long descents, not terminal loss of course, but just decreasing of braking power, increasing rear rotor might be really good idea to do so. Now, in my case, I changed the rear to 180 millimeters. If you are curious how to do that in Spark, there are two options. You can either install additional post mount on top of the existing one, or other way around, just replace the post mount with different one which is suited for 180 millimeters. In Spark case, it's model specific and you have to look for this type of mount in your dealer's shop or just bike shop which has Spark parts. Depending on your bike model, you have to use additional mount, either to replace the existing one or add additional bracket on top of the existing one. If we talk about the Spark, in this case, I replaced the bracket completely with a new one, which is for Spark model. One thing you should be aware of, that it comes without the bolts. Rear bolt works, but the front one requires longer length. What I did is I just bought this one and additional bracket from which I took the bolt, and you also need to use spherical washers underneath it if you do so, so keep that in mind. What was my experience in general using 180? It depends on the location where you're riding. If descents are no longer than a few hundred meters, you don't need to do so probably. In this case, I'm currently in Gran Canaria. I just wanted to testify this, how it works and what's good and what's bad. In my opinion, whenever you have longer descents or you're a heavier rider, having 180 at the rear is a great solution. One thing to consider is that sometimes people want to increase the size of both front and the rear, and I don't see any good reason for do so if you just not using full extent of your front brake. Unless you are really pushing it to the limit, going to 203 millimeters is potential option, but most likely it would be more than enough to just swap the rear to 180. Now, because I'm using 4 piston brakes, it's even a bit different story because I have enough of braking power out of those 4 pistons. What I noticed as well is that the hands get tired significantly less compared to 2-pot brakes, and I have a separate video about XTR 4-pot brakes, which I will leave in the description. But in general, I'm extremely happy with 4-pot brakes, and in case you just need more braking power Yeah, you could do that with 2 pistons as well. I'm just playing. For anyone who's above 80 kilograms and who rides more aggressively, I can suggest more to consider 4-pot brakes, because what it essentially does is that allows you to stop whenever you want to stop, and I love that control, because speed without control is misery. By the way, I had a video about Duke's failure. I might have an update about that, but most likely I will just leave a comment under the videos. They said that that crack, which happened on Sixer's wheel, is a warranty case. I don't know yet what it will mean, but basically they are going to replace it one way or another. Oh, and actually, I just remembered one thing. During the crash over the bars thing, the handlebars hit the frame significantly, and that protective tape at the top didn't help too much. It was painful not only for my wrist, but for the frame as well. So if you have any questions how to change that rotor on the Spark or not necessarily, feel free to leave down the comments. Those things considered. Myself, I'm just going to do additional training in Gran Canaria, and also if you would want to see videos from Gran Canaria, just let me know in the comments, and a lot of it are captured and I will see what I'm going to do about them. That's it, thanks for the time, and until next.